artists. Today we're going to work on a project that is based on the color wheel. If you have been in art with me before, then we've been talking about the color wheel since kindergarten. The color wheel is a series of colors that is divided up in, you can divide the color wheel up in lots of ways, but the easiest way to divide it up is by primary colors and secondary colors. Primary means the very beginning, the first. So primary colors are the red, yellow, and blue on the color wheel. And then the secondary colors, that's second. So you've got your two primary colors mixing together. So red and yellow would make orange. Yellow and blue would make green, and red and blue would make purple. So there's a lot of different ways that we can divide the color wheel up, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as we get into our project. But first I'm going to read you guys a story. I may have read this one to you before, but it's a terrific one. It's about an artist named Wassily Kandinsky, and he was a Russian-born artist. He did move to Germany to study while he was studying his art. But this is kind of a fun little way of knowing a little bit about him. This is called The Noisy Paint Box, The Colors and Sounds of Kandinsky's Abstract Art. So abstract means that his art wasn't realistic. He wasn't trying to paint a mountain to look like a mountain or a flower to look like a flower, although he did do some of that for a while, and this book kind of goes into it. So it's written by Barb Rosenstock and illustrated by Mary Grandpré. Okay. The Noisy Paint Box. Look at all these dashes of bright color that we have in here. Wassily Kandinsky spent his days learning to be a proper Russian boy. He studied bookfuls of math, science, and history. He practiced piano scales to the marching click of the metronome. He sat stiff and straight at dressed-up dinners while the grown-ups talked and talked and talked. This is not something that you guys probably have to do very often anymore, but can you imagine having to get dressed in a tie and a suit for dinner every day? That would get a little rough sometimes. Wassily's well-off world was perfectly polite until the day his aunt gave him a small wooden paint box. Every proper Russian boy should appreciate art, said Auntie. She showed Wassily the correct way to mix the colors on the paint box palette. So there she is. Here's the paint box. She's got her brush. Excuse me. And she's showing him how he's supposed to do it. Wassily mixed red with yellow. Then he mixed red with blue. As the colors changed, Wassily heard a whisper. Hiss. Louder hiss. Then louder still. Hiss. What's that sound? Asked Wassily. I don't hear a thing, said Auntie. Wassily listened as his brush stirred and swished. The swirling colors trilled like an orchestra tuning up for a magical symphony. Mama! Papa! called Wassily. What a noisy paint box! Stop being foolish, said Mama. Silly Wassily, said Papa. See that? He's got all of these colors that are swirling around in his head, and it's making music for him. Wassily painted the sounds of the colors. He spun a bright lemon circle onto the canvas. It clinked like the highest notes on the keyboard. He brushed a powerful navy rectangle that vibrated deeply like the lowest cello strings. He tossed up jagged swashes of blaring crimson and added cheerful dots of burbling green, clanging orange, and tinkling violet. Wassily painted and painted until the colors went quiet. "Look what I made!" shouted Wassily. "Is it a house?" asked Auntie. "Is it a flower?" asked Mama. "What's it supposed to be?" asked Papa. "It's music," said Wassily, waltzing his painting around the house. "Calm down," said Mama. "Do some math," said Papa. "Heavens," said Auntie. "This boy needs a proper art class." So Wassily went to art class and learned to draw houses and flowers just like everyone else. As the years passed, Wassily finished school and studied to be a lawyer. He ignored his noisy paint box and lived the way people expected. But Wassily couldn't ignore the sounds of the colors singing to him in the streets of Moscow. The canary-colored mailbox whistling as he rode to work. The scarlet sunset haze ringing above the ancient Kremlin walls. An ivory chorus of snowflakes scattered on the sable collar of his overcoat. So even though he's going off and he's working as a lawyer and doing all the things that he's expected to do, he can still hear the sounds of the colors that he sees, just like he did when he was painting with his paint box. One evening, suitably steamed and starched, Wassily attended the opera. As the orchestra's music crashed around him, colors of the noisy paint box twirled wildly in his mind, stomping lines of vermilion and coral, caroling triangles of pistachio and garnet, thundering arches of aqua and ebony, with shrill points of cobalt and saffron. So he's been hearing music when he sees colors. Now he's at an opera where there are people singing and music playing, and while he's listening to the music, now he sees the colors. Wassily heard the colors singing. Wassily saw the music dancing. And Wassily was never quite as proper again. He quit his job teaching law and moved from Moscow to Munich. Munich is in Germany. To be a painter. He studied with this famous teacher, then that one. Is it a flower? Is it a house? What's it supposed to be? His teachers asked. Wassily wanted to paint the colors he heard, but maybe the famous teachers knew best. Once again, Wassily put houses and flowers, animals and people into his paintings, just like everyone expected. The teachers were happy. Wassily was not. His artist friends understood. They too were tired of painting pretty landscapes and pretty ladies. They thought art needed to change. Art should make you feel, Wassily told them, like music. Exactly, said his friends, but none of them knew how to paint feelings until the day Wassily grew brave enough and invited the world to see the paintings roaring from his noisy paint box. Bash, rattle, hiss, whistle, murmur, squeak, zip, clang, tweet. Snapping cerulean points, crunching crimson squares, whispering charcoal lines. Wassily named these paintings after the music he loved. Improvisation, composition, accompaniment, fugue, movement, and simply 3 sounds. With his noisy paint box, Wassily Kandinsky created something entirely new: abstract art. It took a long time for people to understand. Is it a house? Is it a flower? What's it supposed to be? It's my art, Wassily answered. How does it make you feel? So these are some of the pictures, some pictures of some of his artwork. He created lots and lots of artwork over the many, many years that he was an artist. And it took a long time for people to understand that it was okay for an amazing artist to paint something that didn't look like something that they knew, that it could be just a series of colors and shapes and different ways of putting things together. So I have here a poster that is it's a poster that's of a painting that he did. And this one is called Color Study, Squares with Concentric Rings, 1913. And we can see here that there are several different rings or circles that are inside squares. And basically what he's doing with this is he's looking at how the colors work together. So here we have kind of a pinkish color surrounded by green, blue surrounded by green, but the green is surrounded by pink, and then there's kind of a reddish orange around it. This one is all what I call warm colors. So warm colors are things that might make you think of fire or sunshine or something like that. So reds and yellows and oranges are warm colors. Purples and greens and blues are considered cooler colors. Here we have some gray and blue and almost a black. It's kind of a deep bluish green black. Here we have pretty much, well, we don't have purple in there, but we do have a red, we have a yellow, we have a green, we have a blue, we have kind of a turquoisey blue. So there's lots and lots of ways that he has put this piece together, where he's looking at how the colors interact when they're next to each other, what they do when how they kind of play together. So we are going to be doing a piece today where we are going to draw some concentric rings. Concentric means one inside of the other. We're going to draw some concentric rings into some squares on our paper. And then we are going to work with our primary colors and secondary colors. And we're going to work with our warm colors and our cool colors. So our project will have a more purposeful study so that we can work on those ideas. And then if you like the project, you should feel free to do whatever it is that you like, playing with your colors, seeing how different things work together and what color combinations make you happy, what makes you feel positive, what makes you feel Maybe a certain color combination makes you feel frustrated or angry. But sometimes those kinds of things are good to be able to express in your art and in your paint, and just putting all of those things together. So that will be our project today, and we'll have a lot of fun. All right, now that we've talked a little bit about Wassily Kandinsky's work and we looked at the poster of his concentric rings in squares, this is our kind of the idea of what our project will be today. So this is one, and this is one like what I will be doing today, where I took my primary colors. Primary colors are red, yellow, and blue. And I took my secondary colors, which are orange, green, and purple. And I did a series of concentric rings focusing on that. So this one has my concentric rings in this row here, has concentric rings in those primary colors. So I have red, blue, yellow, yellow, red, blue, blue, yellow, red. Then I have another set of circles or rings that are my secondary colors. So green, orange, and purple. Orange, purple, green. Purple, green, orange. I could have done them in the same exact setup. I could have done green, orange, purple, green, orange, purple, green, orange, purple. But I didn't. You don't have to. You can if you want to. So that takes care of those 6 blocks, right? That takes care of the colors. Now what I've done in addition to this is in my primary colors, I have 3 primary colors, so I surrounded it with a secondary color. 3 primary colors, surround with a secondary color, 3 primary, surround with a secondary. And then with my secondary color rings, I surrounded it with a primary, same here, surrounded it with a primary, same here, surrounded it with a primary. But then when we get down to this set of rings, I looked at the color wheel in a different way. Instead of looking at it as primaries and secondaries, I looked at it as warm and cool. And we may have talked about warm and cool colors before, we may not have. But the warm and cool colors have, it's just a different breakup of the color wheel. So when you think of a fire, when you think of the sun, you think of yellow and orange and red. When you think of things that are nice and cool, like a swimming pool or the water or the night sky, a lot of times you'll think of purple and blue and green. So the color wheel, if we were to break it up that way into warm colors and cool colors, is similar to primaries and secondaries. We're in this set of colors, we're going to have 3 in each. So in this row, I have come up with orange, red, yellow for my rings, red, yellow, orange, yellow, orange, red. So those are my rings. And then around those warm colors, I have chosen a cool color to go around each of them. And so that would be my green, my blue, and my purple. And then here in the bottom, I have my cool colors, green, purple, and blue, green, blue, purple, blue, purple, green. And then I have surrounded those with a warm color. So my rings are a set of color. And then my surround, the square that goes around the rings, is from the opposite part of the color wheel. So if it was primary color rings, I used a secondary color surround. If it was secondary color rings, I used a primary color surround. And the same with the hot and cold. Hot color rings, I use a cool color surround. And then cool color rings, I use a hot color surround. That seems confusing. It's not terribly confusing if you take your time. So 1 year, instead of doing 12 blocks like we have here, we just did 4. So here I have my primary color circles surrounded by a cool color. I have my secondary color circles, purple, green, and orange, surrounded by a primary color. I have my hot colors here, surrounded by a cool color, and I have my cool colors surrounded by a hot color. And here you can see I did it again, but the blue was a different blue. So different years I have different kinds of ideas, different ways of going about it. Here I did those same 4 things, but I just did it on one piece of paper instead of having 4 separate squares. Here's my 4 separate squares, but mounted onto a single piece of paper. It's all the same idea. And that's going to be our plan today. Now, it will be up to you, especially if you are doing this on your own at home. If you want to do 12 colors like this, but we'll be doing watercolor today because I know a lot of us don't have tempera paint at home. So here's my watercolor sample. It'll be up to you as to whether or not you want to do 12, or if you want to cut your paper down into smaller blocks so that it's not one large sheet of paper, it's maybe 4 blocks of paper. It's up to you to figure out how you're going to do it. But mine, the sample that I'm going to be doing along with you, is going to be based on this. I'm going to be getting it set up into 12 blocks and the rings that go inside the blocks, and then we'll be going from there. So to begin with, and you can see here, I actually, when I did mine before, I labeled what the section was going to be, and this was going to be hot colors inside cool, cool colors inside hot, primary colors inside secondary colors, and secondary colors inside primary colors. And now these little labels here on the side helped me remember what I was working on. Okay, so here is a set where I have already drawn my circles. Let's see if I can lift this up so that you can see that a little bit better. There we go. So you can see that I've already drawn my circles, but you need to know how we're going to get to this point. So to get to this point, I'm going to be using a ruler because that will help me. Okay, so I have my paper, and I'm going to take a ruler. I will use a ruler probably a little more like yours. It's just a little longer. So if my paper is 9 by 12, and it is, then I need to make, and I want to make 3 columns and 4 rows. I'm going to go along my paper and I'm going to mark out my inches. I want 3-inch squares. So I'm going to make I'm going to make a mark here at 3. Use a pen. I'm going to make a mark at 6, and I don't have to worry about 9 because that's already there. Then I'm going to do that again. And the reason I have to do it multiple times is I want to make sure that my line is going to be straight on the vertical and straight on the horizontal. So there's 3 and 6. And then one more time just for safety's sake. 3 and 6. Okay, then I line my ruler up along those 3 marks. And if I don't have 3 marks, then I might not have a straight line. If it were just 2 and one was a little off, I would know that I mismeasured at some point. So I'm going to draw this line. Okay, and then I'm going to come along and make sure that I measured those just right. That lined up nice and neat. Okay, so now that I have those, I need to go along and I need to make sure I need to get my 4 rows in. My paper is 12 inches in this direction. So I'm going to measure over, again, I'm doing 3-inch squares because it's 9 by 12. That's pretty easy to figure out because both of those are divisible by 3. A 3-inch square is a pretty easy one to paint inside of. It's not too big. So there's 3, 6, and 9. I'm going to do a second set at 3, 6, and 9. And see, if I didn't notice, if my ruler was at a little bit of an angle, do you see how the 3 wouldn't line up and the 6 wouldn't line up and the 9 definitely doesn't line up? That's why it's important to do those 3 sets of marks, making sure that your ruler is as straight as it can be, because when you don't do those 3 sets of marks, it's harder to tell if you are off. Okay, so now I'm going to set this way. And see? One of them is a little bit off. So I'm going to recheck if this one was right at the edge. And it was, so this one probably was not. No, see, that one was not. So I'm going to redo that one. 3 and 6 and 9. And because I'm doing it in pen, I can't get rid of my mistakes. If I were doing it in pencil, I would be able to erase that, right? Okay, so now see how much better those line up? So now I can make my line here. I can make my line here. I can make one more line up here. Okay, so that gives me my set of, oops, that's the wrong line. Here we go. That's what I want. That gives me my set of squares. And then within each square, I'm going to draw 3 rings. So I have 1, 2, 3. Okay, now this is a good place to pause the video while you go through and you do 3 rings in each set, because I'm going to now switch over to the one that I had already drawn. I do want to make sure that you guys understand you don't have to have all 3 rings in each one be the exact same. When you look at my finished sample here, you can see sometimes that biggest, the ring in the middle was pretty big. Sometimes it was pretty small. Here it's pretty small, but here it's pretty big. So your rings just kind of need to fit inside of your squares. They are concentric rings. They are not overlapping. Concentric means that they are one inside of another, inside of another. Let's see if this helps a little bit. Maybe. Okay. But they're one inside of another, inside of another. Overlapping would mean that my rings overlap like that, okay? But these are concentric. So concentric means that they're one inside of another, inside of another. All right, so now we have our rings drawn, and we need our watercolors. We need a brush, and we need a cup of water and a paper towel. So to do this, the reason you need the paper towel is you want something that is going to help you keep your brush nice and clean, because you don't want to mix your colors accidentally. Now, if my colors blend together on the paper, that's kind of what Mr. Kandinsky's did, right? His colors kind of bleed into each other a little bit sometimes. He also did some things that were, this was clearly, well, maybe this was a yellow, and then with the blue out here, it kind of bled in and made that greenish kind of color. That's okay if that's what happens. That happens to me. Watercolor is kind of tricky that way. But if you don't want that to be the case, if you don't want that to happen, then you need to take your time with your painting, and you need to kind of let the paint go a little bit slowly so that it can dry. So we're gonna have a cup of water, our paint, and our brush. And okay, so there's my water. You also need to make sure that you are painting on a surface that you're not going to ruin. Watercolor is kind of nice. It does tend to wash out pretty well, but sometimes it makes a little bit of a mess. Sometimes it doesn't quite wash off, or if you make a spill, you don't want it to be on your parents' really nice table, right? So have a placemat or something underneath. This is my mat that I work on all the time, and I don't mind if I get paint on it. All right, first thing I have to do is rinse my brush. I'm gonna wipe it inside the cup. I'm gonna dry it off on the paper towel. It's clean, so I am good to go with my first set of colors. I am going to mark what I plan to do. So if I'm gonna do cool inside hot, I need to mark that. If I'm doing primary inside secondary, I'm gonna mark that. It just helps me. This isn't something that you have to do, but if you are trying to make a plan that you want to be able to stick with, it definitely does help. I lost one of my labels, so that's okay though. Maybe this is it. Let's see. Yes, hot inside cool. Okay, so this is going to tell me what I'm doing, and the reason that I'm sticking it on here a little bit, I'll just paint these blocks last, but the reason that I'm sticking it on here is because earlier I had it on my mat, and when I turned my paper around, it did not work very well. So if I'm starting with my primary and secondary, I need to think about what my primary colors are. They are red, yellow, and blue. I also want to think about the fact that I want to start with my lightest color first, because then I can rinse my brush, or change my water the least. So I'm going to get my brush a little bit wet, go to my yellow, that's probably my lightest color, and I don't need a ton of it, but I'm going to do primary color. So I know that my rings here, each square should have one yellow ring. So I'm going to start here in the middle of this ring. I'm going to make that one kind of yellow. It's a little bit watery. Might puddle a little bit, so I can, if it's a little too watery, then I can always just go back and get just a little more paint, blot it with my paper towel like I just did, and then paint inside of there. Then I'm going to go to my next one. Brush, 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 and then I'm going to paint, this time I'm going to paint the center ring. So I've got my yellow here, right? And anytime you have too much water and it's kind of running around, you can always blot it a little bit, but it's better to have too much water than too much paint. The too much paint makes it kind of sticky and it takes a long time to dry. It also makes the brush kind of messy. So I'm painting. Now you can see I'm going around my circle, right? But I'm not pushing. I'm not going around like this and then pushing. I pick up my brush and I go around and then I go around. The reason that I want to make sure that I drag my brush, so I want to make sure that I don't bend the bristles back. if I take my brush and I start pushing with it like this, it starts bending the bristles back. Okay, and if I bend the bristles back, what eventually happens to my brush is it ends up looking kind of like this. And this is a mess. That's not going to do a very good job for anybody on anything. So I want you to think about how you're using your brush, making sure that you're taking care of your tools, because if you take care of your tools, they'll do a good job for you. If you don't take care of your tools, then your tools will end up not being able to work in a nice way. So always dragging, thinking about what we're doing, what direction we're going. So if I'm painting a circle, I'm going to be painting in a circle. So following the shape helps me with my brush. Okay, so that's that one. Now this one is secondary inside primary. So I'm not going to paint any of these rings because my secondary colors are orange, green, and purple. So I don't want to paint the rings on this one, but I do want to paint the square on this one. And since I'm working with my yellow paint already, I'm just going to get a little more yellow paint, and I can paint any one of these circles, or I mean any one of these squares. It's secondary rings inside the primary. So I can choose any one of these squares and I can paint outside my rings on that square. Do you have to do it this way? In this order? You don't. For me, it just makes sense because then I'm not going back and forth between paints, not constantly rinsing my brush and washing it out and drying it off and then having to do that again. So I'm going to paint all of my yellow areas first. That also makes it so that I don't have to change out my water because I ended up with really dark, muddy water that makes my other colors cloudy. Don't want cloudy colors. I like it when they're nice and bright, at least for this project. Sometimes it is kind of nice to have a cloudy color. I'm not going to do this whole entire project with you, but I am going to paint all of my yellows and then all of, well, maybe all of a second color, or maybe I'll jump around a little bit so that you guys can kind of keep that idea. All right, so this is secondary and primary. This one says hot in cool. So I'm going to do hot color circles inside cool color squares. So again, I'm going to paint one ring in each piece. I'm using my yellow, so I'm going to paint one ring in each section. And this time I'm going to paint the center ring in each one of them yellow, just because that's different than what I did before. What I did before had it so that I switched the colors up each and every time. This time I'm keeping and just doing it a different way. There's no wrong way except to not try, because you don't even have to do the primaries and the secondaries, hots and the cools. Like I said, in past years I haven't done as many just because it does take a lot of time. This time I have cool inside hot. So again, this time I'm not going to paint any of the rings, just like I didn't paint any rings here, because my rings are going to be the cool colors, which are green, blue, and purple. But one of my squares out here is going to be yellow. So I think this time I'm going to paint this one yellow. If my colors kind of bleed over my little line, that's okay. pencil line does show up a little bit underneath the paint, but not too much. So again, dragging my brush around my circle, but then straight up and down along with those outer lines, or straight side to side with those outer lines, right? Following the shape of what I'm painting will help me keep a nice, neat paint job. Okay, so there's that. Now, I am all done with my yellow. If it feels like I've got kind of a puddle here in the middle, I can take my clean paper towel. I rinse, I wipe inside the cup 2 or 3 times, and then I wipe it off on my paper towel 2 or 3 times, make sure it's nice and clean, okay? If any of these seem like they're super puddly and I don't want them to bleed later, I can take a little bit of my paper towel and I can just kind of blot it. Right? And that'll kind of dry it up just a little bit, but still leave the color there. Okay, this time I'm going to turn my paper around this way because I'm going to start down here at the bottom. And I have color, I don't want to accidentally get my hand on it. So I'm doing primary and secondary, and then I'm doing secondary and primary. So if I want to do my next color that is a primary color, I think I'm going to do red next. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on my red. Then I'm going to come over here and I'm going to choose. Here I'm going to paint the middle. Now the red paint is pretty light. That's okay, because I can always come in and put a second layer of paint on top. I know a lot of times you guys like to kind of dig into the paint, and that it's not good for the paint. It's not good for your brush, and a lot of times it makes your painting kind of sticky. So it's better to start with more layer, with a lighter color, and then put another layer on top instead of trying to get it really dark that first time around. So, got that. Now I can come back, I get a little tiny bit of water, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And see how that goes right on top of the other? It intensifies that red just a little bit. I can fill that in. Now I'm going to need a red circle here and a red circle here. And I should be calling them rings because they're not perfect circles, are they? Okay, so this time I did the middle one, so I'm going to do the outer one here, and I'm going to do the center one there. So again, going around. I should have started on my left. Since I'm right-handed, then I wouldn't have to worry about putting my hand down in that wet red paint, but that's okay. And the reason I went back, the reason it got darker when I went in and got that second little bit of color, that's because I had already used a lot of the water from when I tapped it into the top of my cup. So the brush didn't have quite as much water in it. I'll have to see if I can show you guys what I mean by sticky paint. Not dry enough or not wet enough brushes. I always have a hard time getting that across. Okay, so there's that one. And then I'm going to do the very center. So I just need a tiny bit of paint. So I'm not going to get any extra water. And I'm just going to go ahead and paint just that little tiny circle in there. Okay. All right, so there's that. All right, so if I were... At this point, I'm going to speed up the video so that you don't have to watch me paint each and every part painstakingly slowly, but I would like for you to take your time. So here I'm painting the primary color square around the secondary color rings. So I have my yellow one, now I have my red one. Anytime you have little mistakes, you can always blot things up, but just keep moving, take your time, fill it in using your brush the right way so that you're getting smooth, even, bright colors. Okay, the next thing that you're going to do is you're going to paint your hot color rings, or if you're following along and doing the same set that I'm doing, this is one of my hot color rings. So I've got my yellow in the middle, my red on all of these is going to be on the outside. And then finally for this last section, it's going to be the hot colors on the outside. I just did the hot color rings, so now I have the hot color squares and I'm painting the red around. So once I get to the orange, then I'll be ready to do the orange in my rings and in my squares. I will be doing the orange next because that is my next lightest color. Once I get to the green and blue and purple, it gets a little bit darker. Okay, so I have already added in the orange because somehow my video had stopped at this point. And then I've started on the green. So I've got my orange listed in my secondary places and in my hot places. Now I'm going in with my green. So here I'm showing you the cool dots inside the hot squares. Now I'm going to do a cool square around the hot color circles. So I'm getting that green paint in around one set of hot color circles. Filling it in all the way out to the edges, dragging that paintbrush around. A lot of times it is a lot easier to turn your paper as you're painting. Now I'm going to have my secondary colors inside my primary, so I'm going to paint one ring in each set. That green color, I've already got one orange circle, so now I'm moving on to the green. And then the last thing that I'm going to do with the green after I get this last ring painted is I will paint a secondary color square out around my primary color circles. So one of those is going to need to be green. So I've got my orange. Next to that I'll put the green. And there's no real rhyme or reason as to which one has to be the green. It's just kind of fun to see it pop up next to the red because those are complementary colors. So, all right, the next thing I'm going to be doing is the blue. So when you're ready and you have your brush nice and clean, you're going to think about your blue. The blue is going to be your primary color. It's your last primary color. So you're going to paint one ring in each of your primary color rings, a blue color. Then you will move on to your
I'll get each one of those done. And the blue is a really nice color. It does get sticky very quickly because a lot of times we like that one to be really nice and dark. Don't start with it being really dark. Start with it being kind of light. Then you can move on to your primary color square around your secondary color rings. Painting nice and smooth, even strokes, filling it all in. Now we're moving on to the cool color square around our hot color rings. You should slow the video down or pause it at any time to catch up. Obviously, I don't really paint this fast. This is just on speed painting so that you can, well, speed filming, I guess, so that you can move along with your project as you want to. And my last set with the blue is the cool color rings inside the hot color squares. As we finish up the blue, we're going to make sure that we do a really good job rinsing that brush, getting it ready for our final color, which is going to be our purple. That's also our darkest color. So make sure you do a really good rinse, wipe it inside that cup, dry it off. And then the purple, again, is kind of like the blue in that it does like to get sticky. So you don't want to have too much purple on your paper or on your brush. Make sure you have plenty of water. But the last thing that we have in each row is going to be what we're painting purple if you have been following along with the guided instruction. Again, you did not have to do it this exact way, but it's a lot easier for me to teach a lesson if I have a plan that I can follow, that you guys can follow along with. It's always fun to do a project one way one time and then do it another way another time, which is also why you saw all of those different examples in the beginning of different ways that I had done this project. So hopefully you're having a good time working on your painting, making something really beautiful.
All right, and now we have our Wassily Kandinsky Inspired hot and cool primary and secondary color wheel, if that is how you chose to do it. If you chose to do something different, that's awesome. I would love to see these. So please feel free to post your videos, or not your videos, your pictures, or ask your parents to post them, or have your teacher take a picture of them, because I always enjoy seeing your artwork and what you decided to do with the project. All right, see you later, guys.